So good morning again, and welcome to those of you watching online, and to our women at the Women's Retreat who will be catching this later today or sometime during the week. Know that we celebrate you right here, even though you are missed. Your presence is missed, oh women of ours. There are women here today too. So this is good. Yes, today is International Women's Day, which is always on March 8th during Women's History Month. It began a century ago in 1911, and this year, its theme is, I am Generation Equality. Isn't that powerful? I am Generation Equality. Clearly. It's organized by the United Nations. And on their website, I saw the following. Breaking news. We found a country that has achieved gender equality. In Equiterra, all people have equal rights and opportunities regardless of their gender. Women and girls feel safe when walking at night. They get paid equally as men for work of equal value. Men and women share chores and care duties at home, and they can access high-quality care at affordable rates. Isn't that fabulous? It goes on. No one is talking about at least 30% quota for women in political leadership in Equiterra anymore. Men and women are equally represented in political offices, corporate boardrooms, and factory floors. Women have equal say in decisions that affect their lives, their bodies, their policies, and their environment. Girls are as valued as boys are, and people of all gender and sexuality feel safe and equal. Well, it goes on. Reality check, it says. Equiterra exists only in our imagination. But it is a place that we all aspire to build, and we will. Because to date, no country in the world has yet to achieve gender equality. Yet is the operative word. So International Women's Day is a time to reflect on progress made, to call for change, and to celebrate acts of courage and determination by ordinary women, just like Greta Thunberg, who we honored earlier, who've played an extraordinary role in the history of their countries and our communities. My talk this morning is titled Brava and Brave On. And in a nonpartisan way, hear me when I say nonpartisan way, I would be remiss if I did not mention that if Senator Elizabeth Warren were sitting here today, this morning, that is exactly what I would say to her. Brava, brave on, thank you, and well done. Nonpartisan. Yet, we have yet to achieve gender equality, and we will. So, as the story goes, one day, after the Buddha's father, the king, died, his aunt went to her nephew, the Buddha, and asked him to allow her to become a nun in the Buddhist order. Now, to put this in perspective, this was 600 years before Jesus of Nazareth walked the earth, and 1,200 years before Muhammad walked the earth. So this was a long time ago when Buddha's aunt went to him and said, I would like to be a Buddhist nun, would you give me permission? So the Buddha first refused, saying, it is not yet time for women to become nuns. So hearing this, his aunt left the Buddha and returned later with some 50 other women who, like herself, shaved their head and put on the orange robes of a monk. And with these 50 women standing with her, his aunt once again said, "Buddha, would you allow us to become nuns in the Buddhist order?" Now, the Buddha was a very wise man. Very, very wise. And after discussing the situation with his advisors, although they were subject to an additional set of rules, the Buddha allowed the women to become nuns and join the Buddhist order. This was a revolutionary idea at the time, and it led to the opening of the Buddhist philosophy to all people, rich, poor, men, women. From then on, people of all levels of society were welcomed into Buddhism because one woman had the courage to ask, and when she was told no, she came back with more women and asked again. That away, girl. You go, Buddha's aunt. So the spiritual principle that we're looking at this morning is courage. The etymology of the word courage comes from the Old French courage, which meant heart. So in one of its earliest forms, the word courage meant to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. And so while this definition has morphed over time, we often associate courage with bravery and heroic deeds. At its core, it is a word about coming from the heart. And so today I want to talk about everyday courage and how it requires us to be heart-centered. The great poet Mary Oliver, in her poem, The Journey, and this is just a short excerpt, she wrote, "But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world." And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own. That new voice is our innermost truth. It is the part of us that prays and sings and cries and has the courage to say, "I love you," and "I'm sorry," and "I hate that," and "I was wrong," and "Can I be a Buddhist nun?" It takes courage to allow your new voice to emerge because it requires laying down the old safe way of being and stepping headfirst into, dun 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 dun, vulnerability. Everyone's favorite thing. Just me? Vulnerability is always the precursor to courage. Think about it. Vulnerability always comes just before courage. There cannot be any sort of courage about anything without first being vulnerable. If you think about it, when someone heroically rushes into a burning building to save someone, let's say, there is that first moment realizing that the building is on fire, there is danger, it is a risk, and yet they do it anyway. When you say, "I love you" for the first time, depending on how comfortable you are with that phrase, there is this moment, this little bit of hang time, where there is some vulnerability. You may think to yourself, "Will I be rejected?" In my case, sometimes, are they going to think I'm bananas? They don't even know me. Are they going to love me back? When you admit that you're wrong about something I highly suggest doing out loud and often when it occurs, by the way. It's very healing and empowering to admit when you're wrong in the moment. And just before we do that, there is a moment of vulnerability right before you say, "Geez, I blew it, I'm sorry." But it's that moment of potential vulnerability that unfortunately can stop us in our tracks and keep us from moving forward. Keep us from loving. If we are not mindful, we can allow our fear of being vulnerable to stop us from being great. Please, my friends, Do not let your fear of being vulnerable stop you from being great. Brene Brown said, vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. When we show up with a commitment to being vulnerable in our relationships, they become deeper, they become more intimate, they become more sacred, they expand because our life expands. One good way to measure the expansion of your life is to measure how willing you are to be vulnerable. It's how it works. And so I invite you to begin to consciously choose vulnerability as part of your new voice, if you haven't already. And if you have, I invite you just to do it even more, knowing that the more vulnerable you are, the more courageous you become. So there is a woman by the name of Elaine Pagels. She is, if you don't know her work, she is a rock star religious historian. Her focus in the 70s was on the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, and she wrote the bestseller, The Gnostic Gospels, which Modern Library named as one of the best books in the 20th century, the 100 best books in the 20th century. She's a professor of religious studies at Princeton. She did an enormous body of work on the sacred feminine, on Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas. It is her scholarship and her body of work that literally created new thoughts around what early Christianity looked like. An extraordinary, extraordinary woman. And in her memoir, Why Religion?, Elaine tells the story of the time in her life when her 6-year-old son died of a rare lung disease. And a little over a year after that, she was at home and her husband was on a hiking trip in Colorado when a friend and 2 police officers showed up at her door and told her that her husband had slipped and fallen to his death. One of the well-meaning officers who came to her door didn't know that her 6-year-old little boy had just died a year previous to this. And he said to her, God doesn't give anyone more than they can handle. In her silent fury, keep in mind this is a woman who dedicated her entire life to understanding God and religion and faith. But in that moment, when that well-meaning police officer said that to her, she grabbed the handle of the door nearby, and her fury was so great at the pain of that statement that she literally tore the door off its hinges. While I can't even begin to imagine her grief, I certainly understand that. Like that well-meaning police officer, sometimes we unconsciously say things to attempt to stop the pain. Why? Because we teach we are all connected. We're all connected. And so when one of us is hurting, when one of us is feeling pain or is in despair, there is an instinct to want to stop it, not only to make them feel better, but I would argue unconsciously to soothe our own pain about it. Because your pain is my pain. Your pain is my pain. Your pain is my pain, love. That's how it works. It is vulnerable to be with someone else who is hurting. But if we can be vulnerable enough to be present with someone, to simply say, in those moments, I don't know what in the world you are feeling. I don't know what I can possibly say, but you know what I'm going to do, love? I'm going to sit here with you while you move through this pain. I'm going to stand here while you cry. I'm not going to try to make it better. I'm going to feel it with you. That is courage. That is everyday courage. And it's one of the most courageous and powerful things we can do. for another human being is to witness their pain, to not try to fix it, and to just be present to it. If you've been in any class of mine, you will know I'm a little obsessed about Kleenex. On my first night of class, I always ask the students and the TAs to refrain from handing someone a box of tissues if they start to cry. It's such an automatic response, isn't it? Someone starts to cry or tear up, oh, let me get you a Kleenex. Let me get you a Kleenex. What we are unconsciously doing is we're stopping their tears. Here's a Kleenex. Stop crying. Right? It's well-meaning. The intention is there. But what that does is that person in the middle of that flow of that crying or those feelings, that's where the healing begins. We have to feel it first, right? But when we shut someone down unconsciously, not meaning to, here's a tissue, stop. It's okay, you'll be okay. No. God help anyone who hands someone a Kleenex in my class if they cry. Teasing. I'm teasing. If this is a habit of yours, know that it comes from a good place, but it's also an unconscious need to stop your own pain. So I invite you to just notice if you tend to do that and just stop, unless someone asks for it. So we've talked about the new voice of being vulnerable so that we can be even more courageous. We've talked about this concept of being present to someone else's pain, recognizing that you are hurting too and that is okay and normal. And the last thing I want to talk about is to have everyday courage, to live a courageous life. Part of that means that we encourage others. We encourage others. Remember, courage means to speak with our heart. So to encourage another person is to support someone else by helping them to make their heart stronger. So I was thinking about this idea, and this memory popped up that comes up a lot for me, and I thought I would share it with you. When I was 12, I moved schools and I went into the 7th grade. And it was a new school. And I have a fall birthday, so I was always a year younger than everybody in my class about. And I was really introverted as a kid, shy, introverted. The 7th and 8th graders seemed really tall and really loud, and I was not that at all. And I was put in an English class that, for whatever reason, was the same curriculum that I had just done in 6th grade. It was the same exact thing, same books, everything. And I was bored out of my mind. And I was a kid who loved English. I loved storytelling and reading and words and all of that. I loved it. There I was in this class. And I just would find myself staring out the window, bored out of my mind, twiddling my thumbs. Oh, please, God, make this stop. So I finally got up the gumption about a month in, and I went to the vice principal's office, which was huge for me in those days. And I asked if he'd be willing to sit down with me, and he sat down with me. And I shared with him, I'm in this class, and it's really awful, and I'm not learning anything, and is there any way you could please move me into another class? Because I heard from my friend on the playground that there was another class, these days I call it AP classes. They're doing other things, and I'm so excited, and they talk about it, and I want to do that. And the vice principal said to me, you missed the deadline, Shannon. And I said, I didn't know there was a deadline. I'm sorry, I've never been in 7th grade before. But please, could you just make an exception for me? I'll work really hard, I'll catch up. And he looked at me and he went, nope, you missed the deadline, kid. And I remember looking down and my hands were shaking. And I took a breath and I said, so you're saying to me, not understanding his lack of emotional intelligence at all, you're saying to me that I'm supposed to just stay in this class for the next year and not learn anything and be bored? And he went, yeah, you missed the deadline. And I took a breath, and I don't know where this came from, but I just looked at him and I said, well, if you're not going to be able to change that for me, then I'm going to have to leave this school. And I got up, and I got my stuff out of my locker, and I signed myself out. It was the 80s, we could do that then. And I walked the 3 blocks home. Little me. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to be grounded till I'm 25. What am I doing? What am I doing? And I got home, and I waited, and my mom was with one of my little brothers, and my dad got home, and he sat at the table. I said, Dad, I got to tell you something. And I told him, I sat there, and I told him what I did. And he stopped after I told him, and he looked me right in the eye, and he kind of leaned over the table. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be grounded till I'm 30. And he said to me, Missy, my dad always calls me Missy, Missy, I am so proud of you. I agree with you, and I support you 100%. You did the right thing. And the reason that memory has never left me is because that was a pivotal moment in my entire life that changed my world purview. Because in that moment, I was given permission to have full agency over my personhood. And it changed me. It absolutely changed me. He encouraged me to listen and to experience my heart. It could have gone a very different way. If I were in his position, I don't know that I would be that wise. I would hope. It changed my whole entire life. When we encourage someone else, we participate in their growth and in their evolution. And so he called that vice principal, and he let him know that if I wasn't in that new class, he was going to contact the district and file a formal complaint. So I was in that class the very next day. It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. When we encourage other people, when we believe in them, when we advocate for those who need it, whatever that may be, however that may be, wherever that may be, and there is a great call for that right now on the planet, we are living a more heart-centered, courageous life. I want to just close with a book that I have fallen in love with. This book, this is a beautiful translation of the Therigatha, which means the verses of the elder nuns. Yes, God loves it too. The verses of the elder nuns. This is a compilation of the poetry that was composed around the Buddha's lifetime, written by those very first Buddhist nuns that I talked about. So I want to close with this beautiful excerpt. It is from Sumedha. It's called Great Wisdom. She wrote so long ago, "The path will go on, rising and falling like a song, and in the end, you will find yourself as one lost at sea finds herself finally washed ashore. Listen, can you hear that? The sound of the wind in the leaves, like a wave coming on. Go on, shake up the world, set yourself free." This is from the first free women, poems of the first Buddhist nuns. I love you. Thank you. Blessings. Happy International Women's Day. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.